Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 on Tuesday, the 14th of January. My name is Brian Liddy. Today is the 1056th day of the war in Ukraine. Ukraine is not in a strong position, Ukraine is not in a strong enough position for peace talks with Russia, NATO chief Mark Rutte said on Monday. At this moment, clearly Ukraine is not there because they cannot at this moment negotiate from a position of strength. Rutte told EU lawmakers, "We have to do more to make sure by changing the trajectory of the conflict that they can get to that position of strength." Donald Trump will be sworn into office as US president next Monday after vowing on the campaign trail to bring a swift end to Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine. Rutte said, "We all want this war to end, but above all we want peace to last. Peace will not last if Putin gets his way in Ukraine, because he will press ahead. I am convinced that peace can only last if Ukraine comes to the table from a position of strength." The United States and its allies can't walk away from Ukraine, the outgoing US President Joe Biden said on Monday as he prepares to step down next week and hand power to Donald Trump. Biden on Monday marvelled that at the start of the war, Putin thought Russian forces would easily defeat Ukraine in a matter of days. It was an assessment US and European intelligence officials shared. Instead, Biden said his administration and its allies have laid the foundation for the Trump administration to help Ukraine eventually arrive at a moment where it can negotiate a just end to the nearly 3-year-old conflict. Today, Ukraine is still a free and independent country with the potential for a bright future, Biden said. Hailing US and international support for Kyiv since Moscow's 2022 invasion, Biden said that the Russian ruler, Vladimir Putin, has failed to achieve any of his strategic objectives, but that there is more to do. We can't walk away. President Volodymyr Zelensky countered that the Slovak Prime Minister, Robert Fico, can come to Kyiv on Friday after Fico invited the Ukrainian president on Monday. Fico was calling for negotiations as soon as possible after Ukraine decided to cut off cheap Russian gas that flows through both their countries to Western Europe. It follows Fico's trip to Moscow before Christmas to meet Vladimir Putin, which angered EU countries. In protests against Fico's government, thousands of Slovaks took to the streets on Friday to protest against Fico's trip to Moscow and his friendly ties with the Kremlin at a rally called Slovakia is Europe. The Kremlin accused Kyiv of energy terrorism over what Moscow claimed was an attempted attack on infrastructure for the Turk Stream gas pipeline that carries Russian gas to Europe via Turkey, Russian news agencies reported. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the drone strike was a continuation of the line of energy terrorism that Kyiv has been pursuing under the curation of its overseas friends for a long time. A Ukrainian official said Russian forces were bypassing the logistics hub of Pokrovsk in eastern Ukraine that they have fought for months to capture and are focusing instead on cutting supply lines to it. Finally, Italy will sign an agreement with Ukraine and UNESCO to rebuild the city of Odessa and its cathedral, which was badly damaged by a Russian attack, said Antonio Tajani, the Italian foreign minister. Ukraine said the Orthodox cathedral was damaged when it was hit during a Russian missile attack on the country's southern port city in July last year. Russia denied responsibility. And now, an update on the situation in the Middle East. At least 46,645 Palestinians have been killed and 110,012 injured in Gaza since the 7th of October 2023, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Al Jazeera's Tarek Abu Azum, reporting from Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, states that at least 24 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli strikes on Gaza since dawn. Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majid al-Ansari has said his country believes ceasefire and hostage release negotiations between Israel and Hamas are at the final stages, but cautioned that people shouldn't be overexcited about what's happening right now. Speaking in Doha in English during a bilingual press conference, he said, "It is very important not to raise expectations to a level that doesn't link to what's happening on the ground right now." Qatar's foreign ministry spokesperson has said that recent statements by both President Biden and President-elect Donald Trump have contributed to the improved prospects of a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza. Associated Press reports it has seen a copy of the draft agreement between Israel and Hamas for a ceasefire and hostage release deal, and that officials from Egypt and Hamas confirmed its authenticity on condition of anonymity. The news agency outlines the deal as follows. Firstly, Phase 1, lasting 42 days, would see the gradual release of 33 of the remaining hostages, and Israeli forces would withdraw from population centres in Gaza alongside a surge in humanitarian aid. Secondly, negotiations for Phase 2 would take place during this period, with the aim of releasing all the remaining male captives and the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. And finally, a third phase would see the return of the bodies of hostages killed in Gaza since their abduction on the 7th of October 2023, and the setting up of a rebuilding plan and new governance structure for Gaza. In the UK, Labour ministers have effectively determined there is no human rights concern that could justify halting the sale of F-35 fighter jet parts that could be used by Israel in Gaza, according to a legal submission from two campaign groups. And Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, will visit Lebanon on Friday, according to AFP. Macron's office said he planned to mark the unwavering commitment of France to support Lebanon, its sovereignty and unity. Lebanon gained independence from France in 1943. Excuse me. Rachel Reeves has blamed global economic volatility for the recent spike in UK borrowing rates, which has triggered calls for her resignation and left her contemplating further public sector cuts. The Chancellor appeared in front of MPs on Tuesday for the first time since travelling to China, and after several days of bond market turmoil, which have taken the government's borrowing rates to their highest levels in decades. Reeves told the Commons that the recent moves in UK bond markets tracked those seen in other countries, as she accused senior Conservatives calling for her departure of not being serious. Reeves is facing one of the most difficult periods in her 6 months in office, with investors dumping both UK bonds and the pound amid concerns about low growth in Britain and abroad. The government sold £1 billion worth of new bonds on Tuesday on the most expensive terms since 2004. SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn MP has said it's time for the UK government to come clean on their plans for an austerity to return to austerity. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor have refused to rule out spending cuts in the UK government's forthcoming spending review, a position which is creating embarrassment for the Labour leader in Scotland, Anas Sarwar, who said in a TV debate in the general election campaign, "Read my lips, no austerity under Labour." Today in the House of Commons, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was directly challenged by Stephen Flynn to rule out austerity cuts in her forthcoming spending review. He asked, "Will the Chancellor do what the Prime Minister refused to do yesterday and rule out future spending cuts?" Rachel Reeves pointedly refused to do so, replying, "I'm not going to write 5 years' worth of budgets in the first 6 months of the Labour government." SNP Westminster leader Stephen Flynn MP said, "Scottish voters will well remember Anas Sarwar preaching and promising 'Read my lips, no austerity under Labour.' But anyone reading the lips of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves in the last few days will be under the very clear impression that Labour austerity is on the way." He continued, "The Labour Party also need to start taking some responsibility for some of the circumstances they have created. They've boxed themselves into a fiscal straitjacket on tax and shut off any route back to the EU single market, the biggest single roadblock to sustained economic growth. They ignored all the warnings, including over their national insurance tax hike, and now we are all paying the price. He went on to say instead of washing their hands of responsibility, the Chancellor should reverse the damage done by the Labour government's budget and get the economy back on track before the UK reaches crisis point on her watch. And Tulip Siddiq has resigned as a Treasury Minister after repeated questions about her financial links to the ousted Bangladeshi government run by her aunt. Siddiq, who was the City and Anti-Corruption Minister, was not found to have broken any rules by Laurie Magnus, the advisor on ministerial standards, over her use of property given to her and her family. However, in his advice to Starmer, Magnus said that she could have been more alive to the reputational risks arising from her family's ties to Bangladesh, and suggested the Prime Minister would want to consider her ongoing responsibilities. The minister resigned on Tuesday, saying that she had fully declared all her financial interests and relationships, but it was clear that the situation had become a distraction for the government. It is the second resignation of a senior woman from Starmer's government over an ethics issue after Louise Haigh departed as Transport Secretary last year over a conviction for fraud after wrongly reporting a mobile phone as stolen before she was an MP. Authorities in Bangladesh have filed a criminal case against Tulip Siddiq, accusing her of misusing her position as an MP to gain influence and illegally acquire land with her aunt, the ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Siddiq has been under mounting pressure over her links to Hasina, who was toppled in August after mass protests across Bangladesh. Hasina is facing charges of corruption and crimes against humanity. On Monday, Bangladesh's Anti-Corruption Commission, the ACC, said it had filed a case against Hasina and her wider family over an alleged large-scale land grab of lucrative plots in a suburb of the capital, Dhaka. The case named the former Prime Minister, Hasina, as well as Tulip Siddiq. In the police report detailing the alleged corruption, filed by the ACC Deputy Director, Mohammed Salahuddin, it said Siddiq had become aware of a deal orchestrated by Hasina that allotted large plots of land to Dhaka to family members. This week, the UK Anti-Corruption Coalition, which includes organisations such as Oxfam, Transparency International and Spotlight on Corruption, said Siddiq currently has serious conflicts of interest. Forgive me. A new Survation poll on Westminster voting intentions, the first Scotland-wide polling in 2025, shows the SNP extending its lead over the Labour Party to 9 points. Since the general election last summer, the poll indicated that SNP support continues to grow, while the Labour Party have dropped a total of 11%. The Westminster voting intention in Scotland said that you had to set the SNP at 33%, Labour at 24%, the Conservatives at 13%, the Reform Party at 15%, and the Liberal Democrats at 9%. Commenting, SNP Westminster Deputy Leader Pete Wishart MP said, "This poll is an encouraging confirmation that people in Scotland are uniting behind the leadership of John Swinney and showing support for an SNP budget that protects our public services and invests in our economy and in our future." He went on to say that for the Labour Party in Scotland, it shows that their new slogan is spot on. They do indeed have a new direction. It's called plummeting in the polls under Anis Sarwar. For the senior figures in the Labour Party, their continued slump in the polls can hardly come as a surprise. Labour promised change, but the public are seeing that they have already lost control. He continued, with this week showing that the Chancellor is rapidly losing control over public finances, Labour are now threatening a return to severe austerity cuts. Anis Sarwar's promise of "read my lips, no austerity under Labour" looks set to be the latest Labour promise to be dumped. The cost of building the Sizewell C nuclear power plant in Suffolk has doubled since the plans were presented to the UK government in 2020 and could now reach close to £40 billion, according to reports. A rise in construction charges over recent years, combined with cost overruns and delays at the EDF's Hinkley Point C nuclear project in Somerset, is expected to increase the final bill to build a successor project at Sizewell, according to the Financial Times. In a new report, the court auditor said delays were already accumulating at Sizewell C. It recommended that EDF should secure new investors for Hinkley, reducing its financial exposure to that project before making a final investment decision on Sizewell C. The fresh concern over costs has emerged weeks after the Labour donor and green energy entrepreneur Dale Vince convinced the government's new value for money czar to examine the cost of a nuclear power. Responding to the reports, the SNP said, Westminster's nuclear obsession is another financial black hole in Brexit Britain. The SNP said that only last year the cost of Hinkley Point nuclear plant spiralled to £46 billion. The initial budget was £18 billion. In total, Sizewell C and Hinkley Point are now a combined £48 billion over budget. Dave Duggan MP, the SNP's net zero and energy spokesman, warned that only clean, renewable energy will tackle the climate emergency, bring soaring energy bills down, and all for a fraction of the price. Dave Duggan MP said, in a week that the Chancellor has clearly lost control of the public finances, Labour's costly commitment to expensive nuclear energy is another financial black hole in Brexit Britain. He continued, Sizewell C and Hinkley Point are now £48 billion over budget. The cost of Westminster's nuclear obsession is spiralling out of control and will do nothing to help people battling the ongoing cost of living crisis. It's abundantly clear this nuclear will cost more. It is costing more and will send bills soaring even further, all while households in Scotland can see clean, renewable energy being produced in their own backyards. Imports of cattle, pigs and sheep from Germany have been banned to protect farmers, their livelihoods and food security following the discovery of foot and mouth disease, or FMD, in water buffalo in Brandenburg. The risk level of FMD to the UK has been increased to medium. FMD does not pose a risk to human health, but is a highly contagious virus of cattle, sheep, pigs and other cloven hoofed animals. This virus spreads easily through direct contact and airborne transmission is possible, and the disease can quickly affect entire herds. The Scottish Government will continue to monitor the situation, working closely with German authorities and other UK administrations to take necessary action to protect livestock. Scotland's Chief Veterinary Officer Sheila Voas said, I appreciate the concern this latest development will be causing to the farming community and wider agricultural sector in Scotland. We have not seen foot and mouth disease in Scotland since 2001, and alongside government restrictions with strict on-farm biosecurity, compliance with the swill feeding ban and the reporting of all suspicious notifiable disease promptly, we can avoid a further outbreak. Agriculture Minister Jim Fairley said, we have robust contingency plans in place to manage the risk to this disease to protect farmers and our food security. He went on to say the Scottish Government's preparedness was tested in 2018 through Exercise Blackthorn, which simulated a medium to large-scale foot and mouth disease outbreak that had spread from England to Wales and Scotland, and I am confident in our ability to manage any such occurrence. I am urging livestock keepers to remain vigilant for signs of the disease and remind them they have a legal requirement to immediately report any suspicion of disease in Scotland to the local Animal and Plant Health Agency Field Services Office. The Biden administration has raced to allocate $74 billion of funding for climate initiatives before Donald Trump's inauguration. However, a further $20 billion is vulnerable to potential rollback by the incoming president, according to newly published figures. As the inauguration of Trump looms, the outgoing administration has been accelerating its allocation of cash for climate change and clean energy programs before they are throttled by the incoming US president. Laden with funds from Landmark Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, the Biden administration is rushing to lock in support for renewable power, electric vehicles, batteries, and other initiatives aimed at combating the climate crisis in a way that Trump cannot easily axe. Trump has vowed to kill off what he calls the Green New Scam and rescind all the unspent funds. Once he becomes president on the 20th of January, he went on to say, "That will be such an honour." The president-elect said on the campaign trail, calling the campaign bill the greatest scam in the history of any country. While Trump will be able to block unallocated spending, funding already committed will be difficult to claw back. The Biden administration has therefore been racing to push out money to make it Trump-proof, having now allocated $74 billion of IRA money, according to figures provided by Atlas Public Policy. Encouraging companies to make and deploy clean energy components in the US has taken time, as have Treasury rules on what qualifies for tax credits, but the Biden administration has sought to move quickly despite this, according to Kate Gordon, formerly a senior advisor to Jennifer Granholm, Biden's energy secretary. She said, "There's been an urgency from the beginning, but that urgency is now definitely ramping up," said Gordon, now chief executive of California Forward. "There's a huge need to get the money out and contracted." Major investments include $1.5 billion to the electric car manufacturer Rivian in November to expand its presence in Georgia, and $460 million to Samsung in December to build batteries, and $754 million to Novonix, also last month, to supply rare earth materials for batteries. Of the money not yet handed over, there are billions of dollars targeted at climate-friendly farming practices, upgrades to energy efficiency in homes, conservation programs, and support for coastal communities dealing with floods and other climate impacts. Some elected Republicans are nervous about a political backlash to complete repeal of the climate bill, despite having unanimously voted against it. According to the Atlas Investment Tracker, more than three-quarters of the $160 billion in privately led clean energy and manufacturing projects supported by the IRA are in Republican-held districts and are responsible for more than 166,000 newly announced jobs. Last summer, a group of Republican lawmakers wrote to Johnson, urging him not to dismantle the legislation. German police have launched an investigation after the far-right Alternative for Deutschland party distributed flyers designed to resemble plane tickets for deportation that were addressed to illegal immigrants as part of an increasingly provocative campaign for next month's general election. People from immigrant communities in the southwestern city of Karlsruhe found the flyers in their letterboxes, although it was not immediately clear if they had been directly targeted. The criminal police force in Karlsruhe said in a statement today that it had opened an investigation into persons unknown on suspicion of incitement to racial hatred. A police spokesperson said a complaint had been filed referring to a social media post about the flyer, which had an AFD logo, a QR code linking to the website of the party's local chapter, and the purported destination of a safe country of origin. Below that was the tagline, "Only Remigrate can save Germany." The flyers strongly resemble the fake plane ticket distributed by the neo-Nazi NPD party in 2013 in a racist bid to discourage immigrant candidates from standing for parliament. Both campaigns recalled chilling Nazi-era appeals to Jews to leave Germany, offering free tickets to Jerusalem, never to return, with a design that also mimicked actual travel documents. The mayor of Karlsruhe, Frank Mentrup, of the Social Democrats, accused the AFD of fomenting fear among communities that already felt anxious about far-right sentiment spreading in Germany. The AFD, which authorities class as suspected right-wing extremist, is polling in second place with about 21% support behind the Christian right Christian Democrats, meaning it is highly unlikely to win an outright majority. All the mainstream Democratic parties have ruled out forming a governing coalition with the hard right. The Scottish Government led a debate in the Scottish Parliament on the value of Scotland's arts and culture today, as the SNP urged opposition parties to back the additional £34 million funding for the sector in the Scottish budget. The Scottish Government's budget includes provision of a record £34 million increase in funding for arts and culture, which is far more than the £25 million demanded by Labour ahead of the Scottish Government budget being published. In the debate, Cabinet Secretary for Culture, Angus Robertson, pointed out the higher level of culture funding in Scotland compared to the rest of the UK, and that Labour had cut funding for culture in the recent UK budget. The Scottish Government say they are committed to increasing arts and culture funding by £100 million by 2028-29, and if their budget is passed, will be halfway to achieving that target after just 2 years. Commenting, SNP MSP Evelyn Tweed said, "Scotland's world-renowned arts culture sector deserves our support, and the SNP Scottish budget will rightly deliver an additional £34 million of funding." She went on to say the SNP government listened to the creative sector before the budget and acted. Organisations rightly flagged the impact of the Tory-created cost of living crisis, inflation, and the threat of Labour's national insurance hike poses to their future. For Labour to demand £25 million for culture before the budget and then not back the SNP's £34 million investment, which exceeds their demands, would be ridiculous, especially against the backdrop of culture funding being cut by Labour's own UK government. She went on to say, "Our incredible creative industries deserve certainty in their funding, not game playing by the opposition. This is a budget which goes above and beyond what opposition parties called for on culture funding, so they must now back it in Parliament." In a ministerial statement today, Social Justice Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville told MSPs that more than 456,000 people are due to receive interheating payments totalling £26.8 million this winter. Updating the Scottish Parliament on support with fuel costs for people on low incomes, Ms Somerville confirmed that the Scottish Government is forecast to invest more than £65 million in 3 winter heating benefits this year, providing vital support to more than 630,000 people with their energy bills. The winter heating payment guarantees everyone eligible will receive a payment every year, rather than the UK Government approach of requiring a sustained period of cold weather, which previously resulted in no cold weather payments being made to many low-income households across Scotland. The Scottish Government benefit, which replaced the UK Government's cold weather payment, provides a targeted, reliable and guaranteed annual payment of £58.75 to support people on low incomes with the cost of heating over the UK months. The UK Government's cold weather payment previously provided £25 per cold spell only when the average of the mean daily temperature recorded was equal to or below 0 degrees for 7 consecutive days. Excuse me. The child winter heating payment provides help to disabled children and young people and their families who have higher energy needs due to disability or a health condition. This benefit is not available elsewhere in the UK. So far, 37,000 payments have issued, totalling £9.3 million so far this year, to support more than 33,000 children, young people and their families. Pension age winter heating payments help people of pension age who receive certain benefits to pay their heating bills, and is providing payments of £200 or £300 to people in receipt of qualifying benefit, depending on their age, this year. For next year, the Scottish Government will bring forward regulations to ensure every pensioner household receives at least £100 support, which is also not available anywhere else in the UK. Ms Somerville said, "When we asked people, they told us they overwhelmingly supported the removal of the cold spell requirement for the UK Government's cold weather payments. Our winter heating payment breaks the link with arbitrarily defined weather dependency and provides financial support no matter the weather. This means low-income households will automatically be paid and do not have the uncertainty of waiting for weather readings for 7 consecutive days before receiving a payment. She continued, more than 453,000 people got winter heating payments last winter from the Scottish Government thanks to an investment of £25 million. This winter we will invest even more, £26.8 million for winter heating payment. That more than triples the £8.5 million provided on average by the Department for Work and Pensions in each of the last 7 years prior to the introduction of our payment. Our winter heating payment is a very clear example of how this Scottish Government is doing more to support the people of Scotland throughout the long, cold winter months. Excuse me. Researchers at the University of Glasgow have taken one small step towards a future where orbital factories can 3D print future tech on demand in space. Dr. Giles Bailey of the University of Glasgow's James Watt School of Engineering has been awarded a patent for a new system which overcomes the challenges of 3D printing in zero gravity. His technology has recently been rigorously tested during a series of trips on a research aeroplane known as the Vomit Comet. Dr. Bailey said that solving the challenge of 3D printing objects in low-gravity environments could pave the way for orbital fabricators capable of producing parts and components which could be assembled into novel equipment in orbit never seen before. That equipment could include solar reflectors to generate zero-carbon power for transmission back to Earth, improved communication antennae, or drug research stations that can create purer, more effective pharmaceuticals. For several years, Dr. Bailey has been working on a prototype 3D printer better suited for use in outer space. Instead of the filaments used in earthbound 3D printers, it uses a granular material developed by the team designed to work effectively in microgravity and in the vacuum of space. The unique properties of the materials allow it to be drawn reliably from the prototype's feedstock tank and delivered to the printer's nozzle faster than any other method. Dr. Bailey and his colleagues are also exploring methods of embedding electronics into the materials as part of the printing process, opening up the possibility of creating functional components for use in devices created in space as well as recyclable space systems. Dr. Bailey said, currently, everything that goes into Earth's orbit is built on the surface and sent into space on rockets. They have tightly limited mass and volumes and can shake themselves to pieces during launch when mechanical constraints are breached, destroying expensive cargo in the process. If instead we could place fabricators in space to build structures on demand, we would be freed from those payload restrictions. In turn, that could pave the way to creating much more ambitious, less resource-intensive projects with systems actually optimized for their mission and not for the constraints of rocket launches. Excuse me. Their prototype demonstrator proved its effectiveness in microgravity in November as part of the 85th European Space Agency Parabolic Flight campaign in collaboration with Novaspace in Bordeaux, France. The team took their test kit on 3 flights which provided them with more than 90 brief periods of weightlessness at the apex of roller coaster-like sharp ascents followed by rapid descents, a physical challenge which has earned the planes which fly the route the Vomit Comet for their effectiveness on passengers. Digestive systems, I'm sorry, forgive me, I didn't read that sentence very well, but hopefully you got the gist of it. During each 22-second period of weightlessness, the team closely monitored the prototype's dynamics and power consumption, which showed that the system worked as designed in challenges of microgravity. Dr. Bailey and his team are now looking for funding to help support the first in-space demonstration of their technology. They are also leading efforts supported by funding from the UK Space Agency to ensure that future in-space manufacturing projects do not contribute to the growing problem of space debris. Well, that's it for this evening, Scotland at 7. But before we go, I just want to remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of you, our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. We've raised £20,000 from April to the end of 2024, £16,000 short of our £36,000 target. We had to borrow £12,000 to enable us to pay our bills and survive, but the pressure is still on and we need to find enough regular donors to give us financial security. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but we receive donations of around £2,500. And we need more regular subscribers, but we need to clear our debts as well. You know that our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please do consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, or please donate whatever you can afford. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and we'll see you during the week. Thank you. Goodbye.